Today's daf is daf Chaf Vav. So if they're wishing you a Moadim L'Simcha, we're going to start the Gemara, which is 4 lines down from the top of the Amud, the Maika Mifligi. And the Gemara is trying to analyze the din about which there was machlokes recorded in our Mishnah between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. So let's just quickly, and Rabbi Shimon, who represents the Chachamim in this case, let's just quickly try to summarize the Mishnah. The Mishnah speaks about a Bechar, a firstborn of a Behema Tahora, and in order to permit Shechita, to allow shechting this Bechar on Yontif, you would need what's called Re'iyas Habaki, or Hamumcha. The Mumcha, the expert, would have to investigate the animal and determine and establish that it is in fact a Bechar Bal Mum, which means it has a Mum Kavua. There are many different kinds of blemishes, physical impairments to the animal, but only one that's absolutely permanent. Like, let's say, for example, a split in the lip, that would make it into a Bechar Bal Mum, which would mean it's a Mum Kavua. And in the case where the Chacham, or the Mumcha, if you want to call him that, the expert determined that it's a Mum Kavua, then and only then do you allow Shechita, and you're allowed to shecht it. We're talking Bisman Hazeh, we don't have the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore for sure, we don't have the possibility of bringing it as a carbon. So in place of a carbon, the other option is going to be shechita, and that's allowed, but you need the chacham to determine that this is a mum kavua. Now, in this particular case, addressed by a Mishnah, the behema, this bechar of a behema tahora, fell into a bar. And Rabbi Yehuda says that if it fell into the bar on Yontif, let the mumcha, the expert, go down the bar before we haul up the bar from the animal from the bottom of this pit. And he goes down, and when the mumcha goes down, if he determines that this, in fact, is a mum kavua, then we can bring up the animal from the bottom of the bar, and we can shecht it. But if not, meaning, if the mumcha determines that this mum is a mum she'eno kavua, it's a mum over, it's something that's temporary, and with the passage of time, it will be healed, then lo yishcha. You're not allowed to shecht it, and therefore you're not allowed to lift it up from the bottom of the bar. Even though the animal is still alive and will be suffering, it might die in the bottom of the bar, but it doesn't matter because it's yontif and it's a tircha, and you won't be able to shecht it anyway because it doesn't have a mum. Then Rabbi Yehuda says you're not allowed to coil it up and do that tircha, that extra effort on yontif. Rabbi Shimon says that if we don't know for sure when the mum is kavua or it's a mum over, then ein zeh min hamuchan, which means that we don't have a possibility of checking out a bechar on yontif. The Rabbanan, as an institution of the Chachamim, they prohibited the mumcha, the chacham, from investigating the animal and determining on yontif whether it has a mum kavua or not. That's an Isa Shvus. And Rabbi Shimon insists that if they would violate this Isa Shvus, and the chacham would check out the animal and determine that it has a mum kavua, nevertheless, we would not allow you to shecht the animal. So the Gemara says, "B'may kamifgi inema beroin mumin kamifgi." If the Mishnah is recording a machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon as to whether or not we are permitted, is there a shvus d'Rabbanan that prohibits re'iyas mumin on yontif? The Rabbi Yehuda sava roim mumin b'yontif. Rabbi Yehuda says that for the sake of simchas yontif, and allowing shchita, we will permit the mumche to take a look at the bechar, check it out on Yontif, and issue a verdict regarding this bechar that hopefully it's a Baal Mum, and therefore we can shecht it. Reb Shimon Sovar ein roim mumin b'Yontif. On Yontif, we don't allow, because of that shvus d'Rabbanan, a chacham to check out a bechar on Yontif and determine whether or not it has a mum kavua. And that's a shvus d'Rabbanan. The Rabbanan saw in this action something that really belongs to a weekday and is inappropriate for Yontif. And it's like a din, it's like a judgment, a verdict on the animal, whether it's a Baal Mum or not. And that kind of judgment should be avoided. And the Shvus D'Rabbanan was instituted to prohibit Be'iyas, Bechar, Baal Mum, Al Yidei Mumche on Yontif. The Gemara says, wait a minute. If the machlokas is that fundamental as to whether or not we permit a mumche to check out the animal, the bechar is liflagu beroim mumin bialma. Why don't they just argue about a case of a bechar of a behema Torah on Yontif? Are you allowed to invite the chacham, the mumche, to make the determination or not? Why does the Mishnah formulate this machlokas in such a complex way that the animal fell into a bar, and now we have to determine the status of the animal, and we have to get a ladder, and the chacham has to climb down to the bottom of the bar, and then if he determines that it's malmum, then we're allowed to haul up the bar. Why all the complications? Just argue about the issue of whether or not there's re'iyas bechar al yidei chacham beyond it. And the Gemara answers, the Mishnah and Rabbi Yehuda especially wants to tell me a new chiddush that is relevant only to the case of a bechar that fell into the bottom of a pit. And had he just simply said straightforward that it's permissible for the mumche to check out the bechar on Yontif, we would not know the following. We would have thought that Mishum Tsar Balichayim La'arim Vilaske. Now we introduce a concept called Tsar Balichayim. And that means the following: that if an animal is suffering, the Torah mandates that we relieve the animal of its suffering. The animal is now on the bottom of the bar. You can imagine the animal is hardly able to breathe the air. So even though we normally would, in this case, if there was no element of Tsar Balichayim, we would have said that we cannot allow you to go through this entire tircha of lifting the animal out of the bottom of the bar. I mean, that's an entire enterprise. You have to bring a whole company of people to lift the animal out of the bar. But now we have another variable that plays a role in the equation, and that's Tzar Balichayim. And for the sake of the Tzar Balichayim, why don't we allow Le'arim? What is Le'arim? You know what? I saw the mum, I'm the owner of the animal, and I know it's a very profound wound, and it's a mum kavua, and I have no doubt in my mind, I'm absolutely certain that when the chacham will see this bechar, he will determine that it's a Baal Mum. Now that's called harama. What is harama? Harama means subterfuge, where you sort of, circumvent the law. You find like a loophole in the law. You declare, oh, I'm certain, I'm confident that the Kohen is going to find, that the mumche is going to find this bechar to be a Baal Mum. And therefore, let's allow all this tircha and permit hauling the animal up from the bottom of the bar on Yontif, because we're definitely going to be able to shecht it as soon as we invite the mumche to see the Bukhar. He's going to certainly confirm our assumption, our suspicion that the animal has a mum. And we should do this in order to alleviate the animal of its suffering. And we're going to do this harama, and we're going to work with like a premise that, yeah, for sure, don't worry about it. We can be absolutely secure. This animal will be determined to be a Baal Mum. And again, it's all within the context of Rabbi Yehuda Shita, that Roim Mumin B'Yontif, that you're allowed to invite the Mumche to see on Yontif the animal. So let's haul it up from the bottom of the bar on the premise that the animal, in fact, does have a Mum Kavua. And where is the source? Where do we find the basis for this kind of halacha called harama? And that's a different case of Yontif, where two animals, a mother and its offspring, fell into a bar on Yontif. Now, we cannot check both of them. If we haul both of them up from the bottom of the bar, no way, no how can we check both of them. And the reason for that is because the Torah prohibits us in Vayikra Perek Chav Beis, also v'espinolo sishketu b'yom echad. You're forbidden, you're not allowed to shech both the parent and its offspring on the same day. So on this yontif, I certainly cannot shech both of them. So how could I haul up both of these animals from the bottom of the bar? Otherwise, they're going to die. So Rabbi Yeshua suggests harama. And what's the harama? What's the loophole in the law? He hauls up one of the two animals, and then he says, you know what? This animal is kachush. It's very lean. It doesn't have enough meat. It won't satisfy my needs on Yontif to feed the entire all the household members. And then he says, well, let me haul up the other animal from the bottom of the pit, whether it's the mother or the child. And then he'll say, well, I think I made a mistake. I think it was the first animal that's more healthy and fat. And in this way, he plays a game which allows him, says Rabbi Yeshua, to haul up both animals from the bottom of the bar. So if we apply the logic and the ruling of harama to our case of Rabbi Yeshua, of Rabbi Yehuda will therefore in the Havamina say that let's allow hauling up the animal from the bar because we're going to make a proclamation that there's no doubt that when the mumcha comes around, he's going to determine that the animal has a mum kavur. Kamash Malan, that's the chiddush of our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda, after in this case, wants to tell me an extra chiddush that in the case of Bechar, which fell into a bar, we're not going to allow on Yontif the statement that for sure, no doubt, we can hold it up. It's going to be about mum. No. We first have to get the mumche to climb down to the bottom of the pit, make this determination, and only afterwards, when he determines that the animal is in fact a Baal Mum, then and only then can we be allowed to haul up the animal from the bottom of the bar. And we're not going to allow harama. We're not going to allow, in this case, subterfuge. Rabbi Yeshua, allowed subterfuge. That's only with regard to oso v'es beno. Each one, the mother and the child, in and of themselves are royal l'shchita. We can certainly shech them. So his harama is not something that's obvious. Even when he hauls up the second animal, that second animal, in and of itself, if not for the problem of the first animal, which is also v'es beno, is royal l'shchita. But here, in our case, where Rabbi Yehuda has a situation where he doesn't even know if for sure you're allowed to shech the animal, that we're not going to allow haram. So Gemara asks, Hachi, if that be the case, then there are a couple extra words in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, v'im lav, meaning if it doesn't have a mum, lo yishchat. What's the chiddush over here? If it doesn't have a mum, it's what's called a bechar tam, it's in perfectly healthy condition, then for sure you're not allowed to shecht it. It's a bechar. A bechar cannot be shechted if it doesn't have a mum. The halach is we leave it to pasture until it gets a mum. So the Mishnah should have said, Lo yala v'yishchot, mi boile, that's what it should have been written. Don't lift up the shar, or the animal, whatever animal it is, because how can you shecht an animal if it doesn't have a movement? It's a bechor. So Gemara tries to answer that. Actually, when the Mishnah said, Yered mumche v'yireh, Rabbi Yehuda wants to tell us that you're not allowed to haul up the bar. First, Yered, let the mumche go down to the bottom of the bar. And lo tzricha, why did Rabbi Yehuda add the words v'im lav lo yishchot? The avar v'aske. He was addressing a case where they lifted the animal from the bottom of the pit in order to show it to a chacham illegally. They had no right to do so because according to the halacha, Rabbi Yehuda insists they're not allowed to do so. But if post facto they already lifted the animal up from the bottom of the bar, now we're going to allow b'di'evet shchita. Kamash Malon, Rabbi Yehuda wants to tell me that im lav lo yishchot, meaning if they didn't bring the mumche down to the bottom of the pit, but rather they lifted the animal from the bottom of the pit first, and then he wants to shech the animal lo yishchot. So im lav means that in this case, since they illegally lifted up the animal from the bottom of the bar without allowing the Kohen and requiring that the Kohen, I keep saying Kohen, I mean the Mumcha, the expert, go down to the bottom of the bar, then lo yishchot. So the Gemara asks a kasha, lishchate, is there a havamina that I would check it? Hatamahu. We have no determination whatsoever that this animal is a balmum. So what's the chiddush over here when the Mishnah says im lav, it's not a balmum, lo yishcha, we don't shecht it. Lo tzricha did nafal be muma. And Rashi explains that on Yontif itself, it became a balmum. In other words, they lifted up illegally the animal from the bottom of the bar. The mumcha came around and he determined that as a result of the fall of the animal into the bar, it became a balmum. And here's the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda. Even though you're allowed to shecht it during the weekday, why? Because it has a full-fledged mum kavua. Nevertheless, on Yontif, you're not allowed to shecht this bechar. And that's what Rabbi Yehuda meant when he says, im yesh bo mum, Yalav, if it has a mum on Erev Yontif, then you can lift it up and check the lav. But if on Erev Yontif it didn't have a mum, and it only was blemished and injured on Yontif when it fell into the bar, then even if he lifted the animal from the bottom of the bar illegally, lo yishchad, he's not allowed to shecht it. So once again, the Gemara says, I still have a pshit over here. I still don't need that chiddush in the Mishnah. All right, you told me the chiddush in the Mishnah is that even though now we know that on Yontif it fell into the bar and became a balmum, we cannot shecht it. I'll tell you that's pshit as well. For muktahu, how can you allow shchita on an animal that's mukta, meaning on Erev Yontif, you are not allowed to shecht? When you entered into Yontif, the status of the animal is such that shechita is prohibited because it wasn't a balmum yet. It became a balmum when? On Yontif. Then it was muktzah, that's called bigu diskatzoy l'min hashmashos, which Rabbi Yehuda states all over the place. In Masechet Shabbos, over and over again, Rabbi Yehuda repeats that theme, that if it was muktzah going into Yontif or going into Shabbos, it remains muktzah the whole day. And therefore, the Gemara says no, that we're going to have to reject this interpretation that according to the seif of this Mishnah, it's a case where he violated the law and he hauled up the animal from the bottom of the pit on Yontif without the chacham going down. Ella, what was the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda when he added the words in lav lo yishchod? The nafal be mum over the Erev Yontif. Already on Erev Yontif, the animal was injured. Again, it was a temporary injury that could be healed and would be healed with the passage of time. But nevertheless, already on Erev Yontif, he suspected that the animal would become a full-fledged Balmum because the seeds were sown and the injury took place. Right now, the animal could survive. And Hashta, now on Yontif, because the animal fell into the bar, Havile Mum Kavua. That very injury became more severe, and it was transformed from a Mum over to a Mum Kavua. Maldutem, I would have said, Daite Iluye. This is not Mukta, because already on the Erev Yontif, he suspected that as a result of this minor injury, the animal would suffer and it would become a major permanent injury, and therefore we should allow shechting it. Kamash Malon, Rabbi Yehuda tells us a chiddush, no. If it didn't have a mum kavu on Erev Yontif, it remains muktzah, and you're not allowed to shecht. The fact that it already began on Erev Yontif as a mum over, that's not sufficient, because at that point in time, going into Yontif, the status of the animal was that it's aser b'shchita, and therefore it's muktzah. So that's the extra chiddush of our Mishnah. We had on the one hand a chiddush that even if he suspects that the animal is a balmum and the animal is suffering on the bottom of the bar, therefore, because of Tsar Balichayim, we should be allowed to haul up the bar. That's one chiddush, that you're not allowed to do that. And the second chiddush is that beyond the chiddush that the mumch has to go down to the bottom of the bar, in an event that he violated the law and he went ahead and he hauled up the animal from the bottom of the bar illegally, even though b'di'evet, once the animal is there and we determined that as a result of its fall, it became a balmum, which would be allowing shlita, no, we're going to say it's muktzah. And even though there was a mum over on Erev Yontif. Tana Rabbana, we learned in the Beitza, b'chor tam shenafal a bar. On Yontif, a healthy animal fell into a bar. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi Omer, and in the footnote here, he writes that this is Rebbe. Yered mumcha v'yireh. Let the mumcha go down to the bottom of the bar and determine if yeshbo mum kavua, even though it fell on Yontif, yalev v'yishko. He's allowed to haul up the animal, and it doesn't have the status of muktzah. In other words, even in the case of a healthy animal, says Rebbe, the owner of the animal, in a case of Bukhar, always is holding out hope that it will be a mum, and therefore will be able to shecht it on Yontif. V'imlav, if on the other hand, after the mumcha went down to the bottom of the pit, he determined that it's not a mum kavua, then they violated the law, and illegally they lifted the animal from the bottom of the bar, even though it evolved into a mum kavua, and that was perhaps as a result of the fact that it fell into the bar, lo yishchat, since he had no right, according to the halach, to lift up the animal from the bottom of the bar, because the animal doesn't have a mum kavua, once he does so, we're going to impose a penalty on him, and we're not going to permit him to shecht the animal, even though now it is a balmum. Amalo Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya, Arei Amru, I think means in the earlier generations before us, like for example, Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah, that's Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana who argues with Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, and Ein Ro'im Mumin B'Yontif. How could Rebbe allow the mumche to go down to the bottom of the bar and make a determination on Yontif whether or not the animal's a Baal Mum. After all, we paskin, we accept the sheet of Rab Shimon Bar Yochai in our Mishnah, Ein Rowan Mumin B'Yontif. We're not allowed to see a Mum on Yontif. And at this point, the Gemara presents Rab Shimon ben Manasseh's analysis of the opinion of Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, and he breaks it down into three different dinim.